Saturday, and today is car day 1, so we need to walk across to the station to pick it up.
Right, Saturday morning, 10:05. I've finally found my first stop. I'm in the car park of Fenioux in my Peugeot.
I've got a list of about 100 Romanesque churches to look at. The list has already been filtered down to about 10, and I don't know if we'll get through all those.
So there's the War Memorial, the Mairie and the church.
As well as the church, Fenioux has this Lanterne des Morts, like the one at Salles. The function of these things is apparently unknown now. To return to the church itself, it is described as a charming 12th century church with a remarkable spire and sculptured porch. The coving on this porch is representative of the Saintonge sermon. Incidentally, this Romanesque church is actually Carolingian in origin. And referring back to that lantern of the deceased, which we just saw, this was a symbol of the eternal light and a glorification of the deceased. It consists of 11 columns topped by a lantern turret and spire. Inside, 34 steps lead up to the lantern. Originally, the windows would have been much smaller. These we can see here are added later, and the atmosphere would have been a lot more mysterious. Rather nice Stations of the Cross in this church.
That's new at the bottom there, and as the chap just pointed out to me, this is an original Carolingian window. So we're sticking out to the D127, which will take us into Saint-Jean-dAngely. Saint-Jean-dAngely. I've got a clue where the church is. I've been conducted to the church by a local lady who pointed out all the firms and businesses that were owned by English people, because all the English people are moving here and all the Arabs are moving to England.
Saint-Jean-dAngely, like Angoulême and Saintes, was a major stopover on the pilgrimage route to Compostela. This 18th century church is constructed amongst the ruins of the wealthy Benedictine abbey, which was totally destroyed by the Huguenots in 1568. We're working our way back now across town to where I left the car. It's Saturday morning, people are shopping. Now, of course, there's a covered market, and I shouldn't have been entirely surprised to realise that one of the stalls, the next one you see, was owned by an English couple, and they sold things like Marmite.
Nouaille-sur-Boutonne.
And that should be Nouaille-sur-Boutonne, obviously. Another little Romanesque church in a little village just north of Saint-Jean-dAngely. I can see some similarities in this arrangement to the one we just saw at Fenioux. The only one it reminds me of in this country that I know of is the little church at Iffley, near Oxford.
and a place this small lost all those men in the First World War.
So there I was greeted by another lady who wanted to give me a leaflet which I'd already picked up. We discussed the war memorial inside, the numbers of dead, and she said how cold it was. Well, I thought it was warm. Anyway, on to Aulnay now, all being well.
Actually grow a lot of corn around here. Are you being a good boy? You being a good boy?
We've come a little further north to Aulnay. This, the 12th century pilgrim church of Saint-Pierre, is perhaps better known than the previous two that we've seen. You will, however, probably see some similarities in the style. On the south door, the coving is decorated with animals and oriental style foliage, with Christ's chosen few and the old men of the apocalypse, each holding a musical instrument and a file. In the carving throughout the church may be seen foliage, signs of the zodiac, representations of seasonal work in the fields, the wise and foolish virgins, the virtues exterminating the vices, and angels adoring the Lamb of God. These, I think, are elephants. See if you can figure out what these symbols and carvings represent. The average person in the 11th and 12th century would have known. At the west front, two arches flank the doorway. To the right, Christ in Majesty flanked by Apostles Peter and Paul. To the left is the crucifixion of St. Peter.
See, even here some zealot has knocked all or most of the heads off these people.
Inside this church, quite simple Stations of the Cross. Here a display of the churches in this area which were associated with the pilgrimage to Compostela, these of which we have seen already. And then a list, presumably, of all the churches in the Saintonge, or perhaps all those called Notre Dame. The stone carving inside the church is equally remarkable, and perhaps more interesting because obviously it is not weathered as much as the carving outside. The finest Romanesque church in the Saintonge, still surrounded by cypress-shaded churchyard.
And this is the village of Aulnay. Right, just had my steak frite in there, €7.50, 5 quid. Water and bread thrown in and mushroom sauce. And the car's still up there.
And just down the road is Salles-les-Aulnay, another little Romanesque church in a little village. And just a little further along brings us to Mandé-sur-Brédoire.
Some of the works on these things is not unlike that one at Fromester.
But this arrangement is beginning to look familiar.
A gentleman passing by kindly told me it was open. I hadn't tried the door by that stage, but anyway, it was very kind of him. And they seem to have rather large violins around here.
So it's time to be making our way further north now to Melle.
Just a bit of Melle, for the record, the covered market.
There are 3 Romanesque churches in Melle, but it's the next one which is on the A list, Saint-Hilaire. Firstly, this man on horseback. We've seen him before, we saw him in Bordeaux. There are several explanations for this symbol and why it should appear quite often. Firstly, you may think, well, he's just a pilgrim on his way to Compostela. Some believe it to be a representation of Constantine, though in actual fact the statue is based on the equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, and either way the thing represents the authority of Rome. The people of Melle may have thought that it was a representation of their seigneur, either way masquerading as an equestrian statue of Constantine. The spiritualist of the 11th and 12th century may have thought it to represent the way man must dominate the inner beast in the way that the man dominates the horse. What is quite clear, however, is that this church is on the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites and is associated with the pilgrimage to Compostela.
Now in Celles-sur-Belle.
Here we have basically a Romanesque doorway, but the rest of the church is Gothic, rebuilt in about the 15th, 16th century. If we look at it shortly from the other direction, we can more clearly see that it was actually the church of an abbey.
And these are the abbey grounds, which one walks around for inspiration apparently. But, not today.
And even then we're going to have to scrap the last 2 places on the list in order to get back to Santa before dark.